So thanks for joining us today for our Q&A with Thomas here, Texas Parks and Wildlife. So thank you very much for joining us today, Thomas. We're excited to have you and excited to get some questions answered. I think it's going to be fun.
Absolutely.
So today's webinar is brought to you by Whole Earth Provision Company. That's us. We have been outfitting Texas since 1970. We are a family-owned retailer based in Austin, specializing in high-quality outdoor apparel, footwear, gear, books, toys. If you've ever been in, you know, it's kind of an experience. It's a lot of fun. And the goal is to help you explore and enjoy and preserve our home planet. And we know that Texas Parks and Wildlife wants us to do that too. So tonight we've got, I am Rainey, and then I've got Heather, and we've got Thomas with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So Heather, if you want to give us your little intro real quick, tell us who you are.
For sure. Thank you so much, Rainey. Hi guys, my name's Heather. I've worked for Whole Earth for 8 years now, and 6 of those were on the floor at one of our stores selling shoes all day long, and I loved it so much. But now for just over 2 years now, I've been at the home office here in Austin on the marketing team, running up our social media. So it's a lot of fun, and we get to do cool things like this and talk to people like you. So, you know, we're really thrilled to be here, and thank you guys for coming once again.
All right. And then I'm Rainey. I have been with Whole Earth for 9 years now. I also started on the floor. I ran a toy department for many years, and then the shoe department also, and then was a manager in Houston and San Antonio. And then I moved to Austin recently to join Heather on the marketing team. And that's been a lot of fun, getting to be creative and take pictures and help run the social. So Thomas, tell us a little bit about your time at Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Sure. Thanks, y'all. So I am the marketing and branding manager for Texas State Parks, but that's not where I started. I've actually been with Parks and Wildlife now for 15 years, which is crazy to think, but I started as an intern. Actually, in college, I went to St. Ed's here in Austin, started as an intern, and just kind of didn't leave. Loved it, and have moved into this position of being the marketing and brand manager about 8 years ago or so. So I've been doing this for a little while. But I've been to almost every state park. So, and in the meantime, I've spoken to hundreds and thousands of people, encouraging them to get out and visit.
That's really awesome. What's your favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of the job is doing exactly this, inspiring people to get out, talking to our visitors, our future visitors that maybe have never been before, and just sharing what makes our parks exciting and unique, and why, you know, kind of sharing my passion for it and why I love them, and seeing why other people love them.
Absolutely. I actually just got back from Lost Maples myself. It's really fantastic out there. I think everyone should go. So I'm going to start off just by asking you if you can tell us a little bit more about the current reservation system, and just kind of let people know how that's going right now, since camping season is definitely gearing up here in Texas. And then we want to open the floor up to you guys and get y'all's questions answered. So if you can start off with those reservations, and then we'll see who's going to go first.
Yeah, so the way a reservation system works, if anybody's not familiar with it, we have both day use reservations and overnight reservations. Once upon a time, we only had overnight reservations, so that was probably what more people were familiar with. You know, that's where you're staying in a tent site or a cabin or whatever, and you make those reservations online. Overnight reservations can be made 5 months in advance from the day that you're wanting to stay. So it wasn't that long ago. It was a much longer time period. It was 11 months. And we shortened that down about 3 years ago to 5 months in advance. But that's all overnight accommodations. Day use reservations are also possible. And those just to visit for the day. And those can be made 30 days in advance of your arrival. I think it's important to say neither one of those things are absolutely required to visit a park. You don't have to have a day use reservation. You don't necessarily have to have an overnight reservation. But what you're risking when you don't have those is possibly being turned away because of capacity. So, for example, there are only so many tent campsites at a park. or RV sites or cabins. So if you show up looking to do that at a park, if you haven't made a reservation, there may not be any available. So that's why reservation is important. The same can be said for day use. You may not think, oh, it's a park, it's huge, there's no way there's a limit on the number of people they can fit in there, but there absolutely is. I think we all got really familiar with the idea of capacity limits during the pandemic, but capacity limits existed at parks before COVID-19. Because our primary goal is to protect the resource of the park, there are limitations on the number of people and or vehicles that can be in a park on any given day. So by making a day use reservation, you're still, just like you would an overnight reservation, you're guaranteeing that you're going to get in for the day. If you have a park pass, this is one of my pro tips, and we'll talk a little bit about park passes later. But if you have an annual park pass, you don't have to pay to make your online reservation, your advanced day use reservation, the same way you wouldn't pay your entry fee when you get to the park because you have a park pass. So you can make those day use reservations at no cost. And that also, there's no extra fees for those day use reservations. You're going to pay the same thing you would when you walk up at the park. And you can do that on our website. I'll say it 100 times in tonight's talk, but texasstateparks.org is going to be your home base for state parks, and then texasstateparks.reserveamerica.com is our reservation site. Okay, so hopefully y'all are seeing our reservation page. If you've ever made a reservation with us, you're probably familiar with this page. Just a few quick tips. So if you're looking to stay at a park for day or overnight, you can type in the park and you can select it from there. But you may not know that you could also put in a city like Austin, and it'll show you by, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and fill this out for this weekend just to see. And it'll put them in order of what's closest to you. So if you're going someplace and you may not know what state parks are nearby, if you're going to Odessa, there's not really a state park in Odessa, but it would tell you which ones are closest to them. So you're seeing McKinney Falls, Pedernales Falls, Lockhart are there. So pretty easy way to find parks. And of course, you can put in specific parks if that's what you're wanting to do, and see what's available. So that's one quick trick. Another option is this camping this weekend tool right up here at the top. So if you are the spontaneous type when you want to go out to a park, especially for overnight, that's not me. I plan well in advance, but you can hit this camping this weekend. It'll show you what is available this Friday and Saturday. So it's just for this upcoming weekend. But say you're wanting to go to a park, the ones you go to are full, and you're like, well, I don't want to sit here and go through every single park and find availability. Here's a way that you can quickly do it. There is also this filter option here in the corner that is a little hidden, but if you drop that down, you can select by some select cities here in Texas or by park. So let's say you lived in the Houston area. I can filter, and it's going to show me again by closest which parks have availability. So Brazos Bend looks like they're all sold out for this coming weekend, but Stephen F. Austin near Sealy does have some RV sites available. So another quick and easy tool to find some options. I mentioned day use. Day use works just like the overnight. Instead of selecting camping, you're going to select day passes, put in your day. You're saying one day, and then it'll show you availability. Some parks have these slotted entry times. I wanted to point those out because that is your time of arrival, but that does not mean that, say you pick this Lost Maples time 8 to 4:30. That does not mean you have to get out of the park by 4:30. That is your entry time. So you have access to the park for the full day. You'd see more of that with like, let's see, Enchanted Rock has a bunch of entry time periods. You can see here 6:30, 8:30, 10:30. But just because you select one of those times, that's your arrival time, not the time you have to leave.
You mentioned those earlier. I definitely got turned away from Enchanted Rock last summer, or no, 2 summers ago, because I did not know you needed day reservations. But
Yeah,
luckily they had something for the next time slot, so we just went into Fredericksburg for a couple hours, and it was still super fun.
yeah, that's Enchanted Rock is good at convincing people to spend some time in Fredericksburg. So that's basically the system. I don't think I need to show anything else, unless someone has specific questions about the system, and we can pull that back up later.
We have a little prompt here about Ranger Day, if you want to talk about that.
Sure. Let me pull this over here. So Ranger Day is something that State Parks has done in conjunction with Whole Earth now for, I think last year was our 10th year. So we'll be looking at partnering again this April. So every year, Whole Earth Provision Company has been a very gracious sponsor, and they have an event called State Parks Month during the month of April, where they collect donations in their stores, which come to support state parks, which is an awesome program. They have various giveaways for different donation levels, and it's really cool and important program. It actually is what funds our trail maps. So if you've ever been to one of our parks and you've used one of our trail maps, that was because of our partnership with Whole Earth. But one thing we do is one Sunday during that State Parks Month in April, we have a ranger at every Whole Earth store, basically there to do exactly what I'm doing tonight, to answer questions, to talk about what there is to do at state parks, and just, they're all local rangers. So if you go to the store in Houston, you're probably going to be talking to someone from Sheldon Lake or Brazos Bend or one of those parks. So that's a pretty cool opportunity to visit with a ranger and see what opportunities are nearby.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Thomas or for
us?
Hey
guys. Hi, my name is Taylor, and I do have a question. First of all, I want to say thank you guys for just putting this on. I fell in love with Texas State Parks this past year and bought a state pass myself, and have thoroughly enjoyed it. And so, but I had a question to see if there was any way, because I know other than the day use and the camping and the overnight stay, is there any easier way to find on the website to navigate all of the other things that other state parks might offer, such as I know a state park one that I've seen offers, they have a golf course. Other ones have different activities going on. And so just wondering if there was an easier way to do that, to navigate, to kind of see what's going on, I guess a calendar, other than just going to each state park and checking out each state park's website or Facebook page or whatever it is.
Perfect. Great question, Taylor. So there's a couple of tools at your disposal. One is you can't see it because of my background, the State Park Guide. This is a printed guide that has all of our parks in it. You can pick these up at a lot of different places, including any state park. Whole Earth also provides them. And then the Texas Travel Information Centers, various places you can find them. This is a pretty cool tool because it does have information on every single park inside, and I realize this is all backwards for y'all, but one thing that's pretty useful, so there's a map in the middle, like a big fold-out map. There's also a smaller version of it, but then in the back is this index, and this is what's really, I think, helpful. So it just looks like a bunch of dots right here, but basically what it is you can look across and see which parks have camping, which parks have swimming, and you can see every park that has those. Similar to that, if you can't find a printed copy, is we have our state park app. So if you go into your app store, it's Android or iPhone, and search for Texas State Parks, you'll find our official app. It works a lot like the guide, but it does have those filters. So you can say, I want a park that has history and swimming and mountain biking, and it'll just show you those parks. Or I want a park that has cabins and stargazing, something like that. And it'll show you just those parks that meet those needs. So that's two pretty useful tools to get at what you're looking for. The other thing that is probably useful, and I know we'll talk about it later in the talk, is our calendar of events. TexasStateParks.org. At the top, you'll see calendar, or TexasStateParks.org/calendar. What's cool about that is you can search by activity. So say you said, I want to go to a stargazing event, and you can check stargaze and it'll show you on a calendar, here's all the events across the state. Or you want to know what's happening at the park near you. So you go, let's say you live near Mother Neff State Park outside of Temple, Waco area. You go there, go to them, and you can also just see all of the events that they have coming up that they have scheduled. Now, I will tell you that our interpreters, our park rangers, are responsible for uploading those at the site level. Some are better than others. Some will put their stuff out a year in advance. Some are like 2 weeks away, and they're like, oh yeah, I need to put that on the website. So sometimes it's not super helpful for planning, but it is really good if you're planning a visit to see, hey, what's going on this weekend while I'm looking for something to do. Hope that helps you a little bit, Taylor.
No, that was all great information. Thank you so much, you guys.
Yeah.
John, it looks like you've got your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, I do. I'm curious about Government Canyon down by San Antonio. Is it a state facility? Is it a park? Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. So Government Canyon State Natural Area, that's a great question because a lot of people don't understand the difference between a state park, a state natural area, and a state historic site. Texas Parks and Wildlife manages some of all of those things. Most of our facilities are state parks. We have 7, I believe, state natural areas and a few state historic sites. The Historic Commission manages most of the historic sites. So Government Canyon is a state natural area. Really, the only difference between a state park and a state natural area is what their focus is on. So state parks tend to have more recreational opportunities. So you're going to see more camping, more trails, paddling, things that you're really doing the recreation stuff. A state natural area is more concerned with preserving the natural component of the site. So while they do have some recreational stuff, it's a little bit less developed. Enchanted Rock is another state natural area. So you've got a limited number of campsites at Enchanted Rock and at Government Canyon. So Government Canyon is just outside of San Antonio. It's in Helotes. It's the closest state park facility to San Antonio. Their park is kind of divided into 2 areas. They have what they call the front area and the back area. And that front area is where any of their facilities lie, the headquarters, the host sites. It's where they allow like dogs on a leash. The backside is they have hiking back there, but that's it. There's no restrooms, nothing else. And because that park serves an important purpose, it is the recharge zone for the Edwards Aquifer, which provides water to the area. So they're very conscious of keeping that backcountry area over the recharge zone as clean as possible. So that's basically the difference between a state natural area and a state park. But absolutely, it's a park that you can visit. Your annual pass would get you into the park. You can make day use reservations the same way. Otherwise, just a little bit different and kind of what their focus is. I do recommend checking the website. Government Canyon does keep some strange hours off the top of my head. So check their website before just driving out that way. But in general, yeah, you visit just like a park, a normal park. Let's see, they're open Monday or Friday through Monday, 7 to 10. So they're closed during most of the week. Tuesday through Thursday, they're closed.
Great, thank you.
Thomas,
Sean.
correct me if I'm wrong. I think there are some dinosaur tracks in the back half of Government Canyon too, aren't there?
There are. So Government Canyon has some pretty awesome dinosaur tracks, actually. I think a lot of people, when they think of dinosaur tracks in state parks, they think of Dinosaur Valley, which you should. But I've seen the ones at Government Canyon, and they're pretty outstanding. You can look down the riverbed and you just see the trail of them going down the riverbed. So it's pretty special. The biggest difference there is you got to hike to get to the ones at Government Canyon, versus Dinosaur Valley. You can get out of your car and walk 100 feet and you can see the dinosaur track. So a different experience, but the ones at Government Canyon are absolutely worth checking out if you're up for the hike. So one of the things I have in my notes, how many state parks are there? This may or may not be a surprise to some of y'all. The official number that we are using right now is 88 state parks. So almost 90. That number has gone down in the past couple of years because we've transferred a lot of our historic sites over to Texas Historic Commission. So parks like Washington on the Brazos, it was really better suited as a historic site ran by the Historic Commission than a state park. The most recent park that left our account was Battleship, Texas. That park is no longer operated by the state. It's being handled by the Battleship Texas Foundation. So you'll see that number kind of go up and down. It also just depends on how you're counting. Some parks, there's multiple units. For example, Lake Somerville has Birch Creek and Nails Creek. Some people count that as one park, some people count that as two parks. So it just kind of depends on how you count. But our current official number is 88, and I think that's a pretty good number to base off of if you're trying to figure out how many parks you've visited. Are there any local conservation programs working with TPWD that could use volunteers? So we get the volunteer question a lot. And while I'll skip talking about specific conservation entities because there are all those happening all the time, we actually have a really great volunteer management system on our website. So Rainey just dropped it in the chat, but texasstateparks.org/volunteer is the short link. And you can get there, and there's a pretty great tool where you say where you're located, and it'll tell you what opportunities exist nearby. So earlier I dropped in the zip code here at the Austin headquarters, and it showed me a park host opportunity at McKinney Falls, a monthly just open volunteer park cleanup that they have going on. So a pretty good tool to find out if you're looking for a certain area of the state, what there is to do, how to get out and volunteer. That said, if you want to volunteer at a park, especially if you're passionate about a specific park, maybe a park that you live nearby or that you really like to visit, you can always visit with park staff and say, hey, I'd like to do some volunteer work. What do y'all need? How can I help? I guarantee they will be happy to have that conversation with you. Another opportunity, if you have the time, are park friends groups. Almost every park has a volunteer-based friends group. That group does things like organize fundraisers, but they also do things like cleanups and stuff like that. Sometimes they help out with tours, whatever it may be. And volunteering doesn't have to be backbreaking work either. It doesn't necessarily mean cleaning bathrooms and cleaning out campfire rings. There's opportunities if you know the interpretive stuff, the educational stuff. We have volunteer interpreters. If you're good with, whatever it may be, if you're good with helping visitors at the front desk, that's an option too. All of those things can be possible. So if volunteering's something you're interested in, know that it doesn't necessarily mean sweating in the sun, that there is other opportunities to help out for sure.
That sounds awesome. I loved it. We used to do a beach cleanup outside of Houston that was always really fun. See some great birds while you were out there in Galveston. We got another excellent question about bats. Are there any other parks that have a bat colony in addition to the railroad tunnel near Fredericksburg? I think that's Old Tunnel State Park.
Yeah, so great question. Old Tunnel State Park is one of the premier parks for bats. I'll diverge a little bit for people that may not be familiar with that park. It's now our smallest state park, but it's just outside of Fredericksburg, and it's literally an old railroad tunnel that a bunch of Mexican free-tailed bats live inside. If you're familiar with the bridge in Austin, Congress Bridge, and the bats that fly out of there, similar sort of experience. The bats live in there, and at sunset, you watch them pour out into the night sky. We're probably getting close to the end of peak season. Peak is usually like late August, early September. I can't say if there's still some bats or if they've moved on yet. Most of them go down to Mexico for the winter, but there are some other parks that also have bat colonies that are worth checking out. Devil's Sinkhole is the one that I would recommend. That's not too terribly far from Central Texas. It's headed out west a little ways. I'm going to pull up the website. So Devil's Sinkhole is a little interesting because it's not what you may think of when you think of a state park. Like, you can't just show up and like drive in. So it's in Rock Springs, which is out west a little. Their office is actually downtown. So you check in there, they take you out to the park, and it's a giant hole in the ground. And you can literally like walk out and kind of look down into this massive pit. But they do have bats that live in there that'll fly out in the evenings. Kickapoo Caverns has a bat colony in one of their caves that also has bat flights. Those are the three that are sticking out in my head. Caprock Canyons up near in the Panhandle has Clarity Tunnel. So again, an old railroad tunnel that is home to a lot of bats. So they're around. Ultimately a big dark space, and bats love it. So, if that exists, if there's caverns, then there's probably bats. But those are four that I could recommend: Devil's Sinkhole, Caprock, Kickapoo, and Old Tunnel. I think are four good ones to start with.
Bats happen to love our San Antonio store. They go into the old smokestack towers sometimes, and so we have to relocate them to a tree.
Well, there you go. So if you can't make it to a park, head to the San Antonio Holworth location.
There might just be one there to greet you.
Let's see. We got one of our pre-done questions: the best time or days to visit parks. I kind of touched on this earlier with the reservations, but if you can go middle of the week, a lot of people now have flexible schedules because of work from home. Going in the middle of the week, you're definitely going to see less crowds than you would on the weekend. There's also seasonality to consider. So fall and spring are our busiest seasons. Winter and summer are both lower, but it kind of just depends on the weather, honestly, right? So if it's super hot outside, whether that's in June or August or whenever, visitation is going to go down. Same with winter. February can be 70 degrees outside and beautiful, and so parks are going to be busy. It could be snowing and awful, and so there's not going to be a lot of people in the parks at that time. So unfortunately, when you want to go out is when everyone else wants to go out. So you just kind of have to find what works best for you. Holidays are always going to be super busy in parks, especially things like Easter that fall, in those Labor Day weekend, Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July. Those weekends are always going to be very popular. And those are the kind of weekends where people get turned away, even at parks where they wouldn't think they might get turned away from. Falcon and Casablanca down in the valley are two parks that are not usually very busy, but Easter weekend, good luck. If you don't have a reservation, you're not getting into those parks. So, it's always a good idea to snag a reservation, even if 2 days before. I went to Palmetto this past weekend, Saturday. Weather cleared up. It looked like it was going to be a nice day. Palmetto is not typically a park that would sell out, on a random Saturday. But I went ahead and made reservations that morning when I woke up, because I was like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And that's something you can do. You can do it the day of. If you've made that decision, it's definitely worth doing. If you're about to get in the car, make the reservation before you drive an hour, 2 hours, however long you have to drive, so you're not getting turned away.
And I will absolutely testify to going in the off season. We went camping in Enchanted Rock in January. And I mean, it was real cold, but we talked to the park host and they were like, you're the only people here tonight. Like we had the park to ourselves. It was great. Like it was super quiet. It was wonderful. It was very cold, but it was worth it. You know, I mean, pile on an extra sleeping bag.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for the experience when there's fewer people around. And that's part of why there is capacity limits, because at some point, if you think it's bad when it's busy, and think if those capacity limits weren't there, how, not fun it could be at that park at, during those peak times. So that's why those capacity limits exist.
Absolutely.
Let's see, looking at my list here.
I may just ask you about fall foliage real quick.
Yeah,
Let's just do it. Let's just talk
Yeah.
about Lost Maples and some other parks for a second.
Yeah. So obviously there's, fall is coming up close. People are wanting to do the whole leaf peeping fall foliage thing. And Texas does have some really good color, especially in certain parts of the state. So obviously when most people think of fall color, if they know their state parks at all, Lost Maples is the one that comes to their mind. Maples is literally in the name of the park. So that's what people think of. And they're not wrong to think of it. Lost Maples has some pretty outstanding maple trees. The big tooth maples there is unique to that area of the state. So they do get some pretty gorgeous fall color. If you're not familiar with where Lost Maples is, it's pretty much just west of San Antonio would be the best way to describe it if you're not familiar with the area of the state. And they do have beautiful fall color. That park does sell out. It will throughout the fall season. Every weekend during peak season will fill up. Camping is probably, if I had to guess right now, is probably already sold out for the weekends. You may be able to find some weekday spots for that early November timeframe.
I went last week and I think I made those reservations midweek in July. And I was camping Tuesday through Thursday.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, it is a popular park in the fall. That said, if you want to go to Lost Maples, we're talking about this before things start. Lost Maples is a gorgeous park outside of the fall season, especially if you're looking for a park with some elevation change in the hike. Lost Maples is always the one I recommend for that. They've got it's a beautiful park year round, just especially so in the fall. But there are other great fall opportunities out there. Garner State Park is not terribly far from Lost Maples. It's about a 40-minute drive. Garner is kind of an iconic Texas state park. A lot of people go there in the summer. It's one of our busiest. It is hard to get into Garner in the summer, but fall demand is not quite as bad. I've been preaching the secret for a while now, and I think the secret's kind of gotten out because now even fall at Garner can be tough. But you can stay at Garner. They have beautiful fall foliage there because they're so close to Lost Maples. You're in that high Texas hill country sort of area. But if you aren't pleased with Garner, you can drive for the day over to Lost Maples. So if you're looking for a place to stay the night, if you can't get into Lost Maples, I always recommend trying to stay at Garner. It's close and you can just swing by there. We also have some good fall color in East Texas. I think a lot of people don't think that because East Texas is known for the piney woods, right? And piney woods, don't change colors in the fall. But there is a ton of parks that are out there that do get some pretty drastic fall color. That's Caddo Lake there on the screen. That's right on the border between Texas and Louisiana. So those bald cypress change colors. We have, let's see, what else? Daingerfield. There's Daingerfield. Daingerfield gets some great color. I love Daingerfield. It's my favorite East Texas state park. I'll just say it. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but Daingerfield is a beautiful park. It's, if you're familiar with Tyler State Park at all, or the Tyler area, you can probably imagine what the parks are like up there. big pine trees, lake, that sort of thing. Tyler's the like popular one. It's kind of the largest of the East Texas parks. Everybody knows Tyler if you're from that area. I like to say Daingerfield is Tyler's little brother. Very similar, same infrastructure. They were both built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. They both have a tiny lake. They're both in the piney woods. Daingerfield's just a little less popular. And for no good reason other than it's smaller. It's a beautiful park. It has the same cabins that Tyler has. So you're seeing some pictures on the screen of Tyler and Daingerfield. Some others out that way, Lake Bob Sandlin, which is a little north of that. Sorry, I'm looking at my map. Lake Bob Sandlin is west of Daingerfield, which is far east, pretty much straight north from Tyler. So East Texas is, if you're looking for a region of the state to kind of explore, I'd recommend heading to East Texas for that fall color. My tip on timing for fall color, and we get this every year, and we also get it during wildflower season. When are the blue bonnets going to be blooming? Or, that those questions are hard to answer. It depends on Mother Nature. Weather has everything to do with it. The secret to fall color is you need a night below freezing. So, for example, Lost Maples, what kicks off that color change is when the nighttime temperature just has to hit past 32 just barely. When it drops below that, that's what kicks off the color change. Now, the intensity of the color change, all of that depends on rain, heat during the day. All of that stuff can affect it. But you're not going to start seeing that color change until you get that first good cold snap. That's right. If you look now, the color change you may be seeing already is probably more to do with just late summer dried out color change, the yellows and browns and that sort of thing. You're not seeing the oranges quite so much, but it's still really early in the season. Typically, if people nail me for a date, the same weekend as Veterans Day in November. So like right around November 11th tends to be the peak for Lost Maples. Now, again, that may give or take a week, depending on weather, but that's generally my recommendation. Now, I don't know that you can pull that same number across the state because temperature differences in East Texas versus the Hill Country. But in general, that early November is peak leaf time for Texas.
It's always exciting to see any color change, even if it is just kind of the sad brown stuff.
Absolutely. I love the fall. I get excited when I see the color change, and I'm like, that tree is probably not very healthy, but it's,
I grew up in the piney woods, and so I'm used to the pine needles falling, and that was our version of fall. So I'm fine with that.
Let's see. Looking at my list of questions, and I'll remind everyone once again, I don't know if anyone new is joining, but don't hesitate to unmute yourself, raise your hand, type your questions in, whatever works best. I'd love to hear your questions. Let's see. I've got a question here. What is the most underrated park, quietest park, oldest park, newest park, most unique park? That's a tough question, and there's some of that is relative. Jonathan, I see your question. I'll tackle this, and then I'll jump to yours for canoeing and backcountry. So oldest park used to be easier to answer when we had the historic sites. I think a lot of people think it's Mother Neff State Park. So fun fact, the Texas State Park system was pioneered by Governor Pat Neff in the early 1920s. And so his mom actually set aside some land, and that became Mother Neff State Park. So for a lot of people, they think that's the oldest state park. If you look at when the land was set aside, that may be true. If you define it like when it was opened, that's not true. So that really, I think, was Washington was the first like land that was set aside back when we had Washington State Historic Site for public use. So now I don't know that I could even answer that question, because now so many of our parks open right around the same time. And so the Texas State Parks Board, the forerunner to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission, was Texas State Parks was established in 1923. So if you're paying attention to your calendar, we are very, very close to our 100-year celebration, which we're very excited about. And we have lots of exciting things planned for that coming up in 23. So we have a lot of parks that started opening shortly thereafter. The Civilian Conservation Corps helped build up a lot of those parks in the early 1930s before World War II. So I don't know that I could even say, I'm sure if I did some research, I could figure out which park is the oldest, but really any of those with the Civilian Conservation Corps infrastructure is going to be those original parks, Paladuro, Bastrop, Caddo. Those parks are our, older original parks, Mother Neff, Daingerfield. Newest park, I do know the answer to that one. So Old Tunnel is the most recently turned into a state park, but it was a state wildlife management area for a long time before that. So it kind of just, it existed, but it wasn't a state park. If you're talking about the newest new state park, Resaca de la Palma, down in the valley, it's one of our World Birding Center sites, was the newest park that had grand opening, hadn't been a park before, and now is open to the public. So that was over 10 years ago, though. We haven't opened a new park in a long time, but fingers crossed and everything working out right. We do have plans to open another state park very soon, hopefully in conjunction with that centennial celebration in 23, Palo Pinto Mountain State Park. If you're not familiar with where that's at, it's in Strawn, Texas, which I'm sure is probably meaningless to most of you. But if you were to look at a map and you put one finger on Abilene and one on Fort Worth, and you move them together at equal rates along the interstate, there in the smack middle, you'll find Strawn, and that is where Palo Pinto Mountains will be. So our goal, our hope, what we're trying our best to do is make sure that park is ready to be opened in 23 for the centennial. Let's see, most unique park. That's a great question. Old Tunnel's definitely unique. It's, like I said, it's just an old railroad tunnel that a bunch of bats live in.
I really want to go out there, though. It sounds so cool.
yeah, it's very cool. Devil Sinkhole, again, also very similar, big hole in the ground, lots of bats. Monahan Sandhills, the giant sandhills out west, that's a pretty unique park. Those West Texas parks are all super special. Monahans, Balmoral, the giant spring-fed pool, the largest spring-fed pool in the world, is in Balmoral. Let's see, Indian Lodge, there on the screen is pretty dang unique. It's the only hotel that we have in the state park system, and it's there inside of Davis Mountain State Park. That structure you see there, Indian Lodge, was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 30s. The rooms on the far back right-hand side, if you're looking at that photo, are the historic ones that were originally built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the ones in the foreground are the more recent ones. But when I say recent, they were built in the 70s, so they're not super recent. They're historic in and of themselves, and so they're nice too. They're just not as they're more cookie cutter style rooms versus the historic ones are all, each one is special and unique and very cool. So we've got a ton of special ones, but if you're looking for unique, West Texas is where you're going to find, Waco tanks too. You got, that is a internationally known bouldering location. People come from Germany, from all over the world, to Waco tanks, which is just outside of El Paso. Most Texans don't even know about it. But if you ask, if you polled Germany for name any Texas state park, they're going to name Waco tanks, if they can name any of them. So because it is so well known for its bouldering and rock climbing out there. So Yeah. Plus, there's some pretty magnificent petroglyphs or rock art from Native Americans that can be found there as well. Palmetto. Randy's got this set. She knows the unique ones. So if you're near Austin, which I have a feeling a lot of people listening in are probably from the Central Texas area, Palmetto is not far, and it's got that swamp land that you would not expect to see in Central Texas. But it looks absolutely just like that. That is not a once in a lifetime photo. I was there this past weekend, and I can tell you my pictures looked just like that. You're outside of LaGrange, and then you've got this swampland that's there. So some pretty cool stuff. All right, I want to get back to the question that someone had about parks for canoeing and backcountry camping. So I'll say the premier holy grail for canoeing, paddling with backcountry primitive camping is going to be Devil's River State Park or State Natural Area. So that park is pretty limited access. You have to basically apply for access. You have to fill out permits to go. But and I'm not much of a paddler myself. My paddling experience is pretty much renting a canoe at a park and paddling in a circle for 20 minutes until I'm tired. But the paddling at Devil's River is some of the most pristine water in the state, which is why it's so carefully controlled as to how often people get to go out there. And then part of it is just educating our visitors, because most of the land along the river is privately owned. So we have to make sure people know when they're putting in, where can you stop and camp along the way and where can you not? Because you don't want to accidentally camp on private land in Texas. That's a recipe for trouble. So that's a great example. A lot of our parks have paddling. I will recommend our paddling trails program. So TexasStateParks.org. Actually, if you go to TexasStateParks.org, at the top there is your menu, and one of them is activities. And this is a good tip for everybody. That activities button has things like paddling, but it also has birding, stargazing, whatever it is, picnicking, hiking, off-road vehicles, whatever it is you like to do. And that will take you to a page that may list state parks and say, here are some state parks that offer this, but it may also list things that are not necessarily in a state park, just to make you aware of. So it might be county parks or whatever it may be. Like off-highway vehicles, we only allow that in one state park. Eisenhower State Park has OHVs. But we have a whole list of places you can go that's not a state park to do that, because we know people enjoy that. And our mission is, yes, I would love for you to go in a state park. That's my goal. But with Parks and Wildlife, our mission is to get people outside, whatever that may look like. I mentioned the State Park Guide earlier, the State Park app. Sounds like, Jonathan, what you could do is put in, I want parks that have paddling and primitive camping, and boom, you're going to get a list of every state park that offers those things. And that's probably a better place to start than myself, just because I am not brave enough to do the backcountry camping. Tent camping is as rough, like in a padded site with electricity, is about as rough as I get, and I'm proud of myself when I do that and I'm not in an RV. So but it's definitely out there. I would say almost all of our parks do have some primitive camping element, if that's the thing you're into. So your bigger question is going to be, where can I find paddling that I enjoy? There's quite a bit of that, but that's where I would start and then filter down from there.
That's really excellent information, as always. Does anybody else have any questions as we kind of start winding down? Or does anybody want to share an awesome park story?
Yeah, Thomas, I've been to Big Bend National Park, but never the Ranch State Park. Do you have any? Any input or any tips there?
Yeah, great question. So I hear from people all the time that say they want to go to Big Bend. And most people do mean the national park. For those unfamiliar, Big Bend, far west Texas, the national park is, if you're looking at the map of Texas and it kind of dips down and dips back up, that dip down is Big Bend. The national park is on the east side of that bend. The state park is on the west side of that bend. The national park is about 700,000 acres. The state park is about 300,000 acres. The biggest difference you're going to see is the state park is far less developed than the national park. So the national park has things like paved roads and lodges and campsites and can take campers like RVs. The state park, we don't have that stuff. It is one of the most primitive experiences in the state. The slogan there, and it's not a joke, is to bring two spares, because when you turn off the main road, you've got about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on your car, ride on some very rough road till you get to the headquarters station. And you will need at least one of those spares. So it's not for low clearance vehicles. It is tough to get out there. You don't necessarily have to make it to that headquarters station if you're wanting to camp out there. Barton Warnock is one of our visitor centers that is on the outside edge of the park along the main road. And you can register for a campsite there, and they can tell you how to get to those campsites. That doesn't necessarily mean driving all the way into the main ranger station called Sauceda, but is a much more primitive experience. There's no lodges, there's no RVs, there's none of that. You pack in everything you're going to need. There might be like water in the area sites, but there's no like padded, here's water and electricity. There's none of that. It's a very primitive experience. So for those that look for that sort of thing, it's one of the, meccas of primitive camping, but it's, it's not what most people think of maybe when they think of a state park. Great question.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more like Canyonlands in Utah than it sounds like a Texas state park. Like that sounds exactly like Canyonlands.
Yeah. I did want to touch on two things. There was a question about ranger-led hikes. And so I mentioned our calendar of events earlier. One of the options, if you go to that calendar of events, is ranger hikes or presentations. So that's a great way to see. Almost all of our parks do offer some sort of interpretive ranger guided component. It might be a hike, it might be a birding sit, it might be a stargazing thing. But that counter events is a great way to find something to do. Most of them do include a ranger. There's a few self-guided things like scavenger hunts and that sort of thing, but a lot of that is guided by somebody. So that's always going on. If you have a camping reservation or a day use reservation, I always recommend checking out that counter of events just to see what may be going on that when you're visiting, even if you don't necessarily plan your visit based on that. And then I mentioned the park pass earlier, and I wanted to talk about that. And it sounds like some of our listeners here on the call today are familiar with the park pass. But if you're not familiar with that pass, the way it works is it's $70 a year. Get a card. Oh, there it goes. Kind of. You get a card like this, $70 a year, and it covers the entrance fees for you and everyone in your vehicle. Our average entrance fee, and it varies by park, is $5 per person per day. So if you're taking a family of 3 or 4 for a weekend, that pass can pay for itself in that weekend, especially if it's a long weekend. So I highly recommend a park pass. The other tip I will say is if you have kids under the age of 12, 12 and under never pay an entry fee in a state park. So it's a great way to get the kids out of the house, do something, even if it's just for a little while. Find a state park, swing by, still make your reservations. You'd put in how many kids you have. It's not going to charge you for them. It does all of that automatically. Another fun thing to know is you don't need a fishing license when you're in a state park. So as long as your feet are on state park property, you do not need a fishing license to fish. Now, bag limits, that sort of thing, length, all of that still applies. But you don't have to have the license to go fishing. So if you've ever been curious about fishing, like, I kind of want to do that, but I don't want to spend X amount of money on a fishing license for something I may hate or my kid may hate, go to a state park, try it out there. A lot of them even offer like loaner programs where they provide the rod and tackle and all of that. So you can legitimately try out fishing with no cost other than getting into the park. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd recommend that. So
does anybody have any last questions before we wrap up? I don't want to leave anybody hanging.
Actually, I do have one last question, which I just now thought of. So you mentioned that Waco Tanks has petroglyphs, and of course there's the one out, in far west near Del Rio.
Seminole Canyon.
Yeah, Seminole Canyon. So that's two. Are there others that
Those
have
are
the
petroglyphs.
petroglyphs or rock art of one kind or another?
Yeah, those two are going to be your best bets for seeing rock art. So Seminole Canyon is the easiest one to see. You literally walk out the ranger station, go down, go up 2 staircases, and you're feet away from some pretty significant rock art. Waco Tanks has a lot of rock art, but you pretty much need to go on a guided hike to find it all, because it's in like crevices and things. It's easy to see. You can get inches away from them, but you kind of have to know where to look. So if you're just walking on a trail, you can miss them pretty easily. There is a few other sites that have them. Big Bend Ranch has some rock art, but where I couldn't say it's 300,000 acres. There's different spots. So if you're looking for rock art that's pretty reasonably easy to see, your two best bets are going to be Seminole Canyon and Waco Tanks.
Well, if that's all the questions, then I guess we're wrapped. Thank y'all so much for a wonderful night and for staying and talking with us. And we will see y'all for our next event.
Bye.
Thanks again, man. It's always a blast.
Yeah, I had a great time. I love it. Thanks again for all y'all do for us too. We couldn't do it without y'all's help. So thank you.
And I love the parks. There's nothing. It's my favorite. It's my favorite thing.
I've got my first trip of the season in about a month, going back to Enchanted Rock, and I'm so excited, and I can't wait, and I hope that it's chilly because I'm sick of the heat and I'm ready for some cold weather camping. That's my favorite. So
I had so much fun at Lost Maples, and I'm like, all right, what's next?
Yeah, my Palmetto trip was a replacement. I was supposed to go camping at South Llano River out near Junction, and then it'd been rainy all week, and we were going to take the RV. We changed tent camping to RV camping, and we went to go get the RV, borrow my parents' RV, and it was so muddy we couldn't get it out, and so then we just scrapped the whole thing. And we're like, all right, we'll just go to Palmetto for the day. So but yeah,
and it was still great.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you, Heather. I'm looking forward to those chilly November nights. That's the best time to be out there.
Oh yeah. Well, y'all have a great night, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.